Hello and welcome to Just Onside. It's Friday. It's been a very long week, yet again for me. For you, always, has it been a long week?
Yeah, pretty much the same Monday to Fridays. Normally we take Saturday, Sunday just to recover. Got some good football this week. I'm a huge game on Sunday. But we've got the added luxury of a few extra days off here in the UAE because it's National Day on Monday. So it's a public holiday for us on Monday and Tuesday. No schools, no work. So hopefully take the family out, go see some celebrations, some events, some fireworks. So it should be fun. Good stuff.
National Day. I presume that's the birth of Dubé. I think it's 53 years old. You can tell this is take two because
Yeah,
we
something.
did this.
Yeah, we know you're not doing your research like that, but no, all good. Yeah, absolutely, it is the case. But yeah, I mean, look, they're very. It's an incredibly patriotic country to a lot of extent. You see a lot of murals and kind of canvases of the royal family, the rulers, and all the rest of it, and it's ingrained, right, in terms of the celebration of the birth of the country. So there'll be a huge amount of lavish, let's say, expenditure in terms of fireworks and celebrations. And yeah, everyone's in a good space, and there'll be lots of various events taking place. So we're just going to choose a nice place to get to have a bite to eat and watch some amazing fireworks and some festivities. So it should be good. 4 days, happy days, no complaints.
Well, you deserve the break and enjoy yourself over the weekend. I've got Monday off, but it's Windsor here. There's no celebration. There's no National Blackburn Day here, so it is what it is.
You,
But I
you've
am going. I am going to
you've not.
Blackburn Leeds tomorrow.
Oh, Blackburn Leeds at
Yeah,
the
yeah. So
is it at Ewood Park?
it's at Ewood Park. So I do my because I tend to go Ewood Park when Leeds are in town. So it should be a good day. Obviously, I'm hoping for a Leeds win. We've had a few wins on the bounce, top of the table. Let's make sure it continues. Right. Okay, that's enough about Leeds. There's only one game really to talk about, and that's on Sunday. That's the battle between the two heavyweights, Liverpool, an in-form Liverpool against an out of sorts Man City. It just seems to get from bad to worse. I mean, albeit they arrested the slide of losses, but in a sense, it's probably just as disappointing. So, what's your thoughts? What's happening to Guardiola? Plus, also, there's some nonsense going on. He had scratches on his face. He said it's self-harm. I have absolutely no idea whether he's having a meltdown or not. So, what's your take on what's happening to Man City and in particular Pep Guardiola?
You mentioned it there, you about the fact that they've arrested their. I think they lost five in a row, hadn't they, in all competitions? And they arrested that one in midweek. But if anything, it was worse because to some extent, if they had just won the game, I mean, they were 3-0 up against Feyenoord. If they just won the game, and there would have been a lot of people that would have said, okay, fine, they're expected to beat Feyenoord at home, irrespective of the kind of form they're in. So weirdly, there would have been probably less stock placed in an upturn in fortunes. Yet it probably wasn't the same in terms of the way it then transpired over those last 15, 20 minutes, because now it seems even worse, having shown the type of collapse that they've not had the propensity to do, right? If you watch that game, Ayub, I mean, I was watching the other game. I think Arsenal were playing at the same time, so I was watching that game, and then I quickly flicked over because Arsenal had a resounding victory in Portugal. I flicked over when it was 3-2, and I was like, okay, let's see what this is about. And it was so interesting to me. I don't know if you watched the game, but there was a scenario at 3-2, for example. Just to give an example of where City are right now in terms of mindset. This is a team that's always feels very much in control when they're in form, when they're in confidence. They suck the life out of you as a team. They suffocate you by keeping the football by swarming all over you. Normally, when they're in the absolute pomp. And here they were 3-2 up, probably thinking what you should do, which is okay, let's just get everyone behind the ball. Let's just see this one out. It's clearly going to be a nervy 5, 6 minutes. And you had Jack Grealish taking early quick free kicks. I remember watching that and thinking these are scrambled brains, these are confused minds right now. They're uncertain about how to go about it. It's not as though it's a knockout game where you have to score another goal for goal difference or to go through to the next round. He's taking quick free kicks. You've got Haaland taking shots when you could perhaps recycle the ball. So, and you saw the look on the faces at full time. Where I don't know if you saw the equalising goal, but I mean, you're thinking if you're 3-2 up at home, to concede a goal where you've got the goalkeeper 30 yards away from his goal, You've got the fella crossing it in, and there's two guys. There's actually three attacking players to City's one or two. And you're thinking, is that the right picture when it's like the 90th minute, the 91st minute? It really it gave an idea of perhaps right now where they are mentally, which is perhaps not enough leaders on the pitch, which is shocking given the amount of trophies and the triumphs that they've had over the years. So for me, it was a testament to where they are mentally right now. A real look of disbelief at full time. You saw Guardiola, Bernardo Silva, lots of kind of post-mortems taking place on the pitch, but there was just a look of disbelief. And right now, you have to think. I watched the entire Pep Guardiola press conference this morning or this afternoon, I should say. I think it was a good press conference, to be honest. It was very honest, very open, not too spiky, but just openly saying, "Look, these are testing times. What do you want me to say? I'm not going to hide from it. We're going to try and attack it full on and try and arrest this slide." Look, it is for me the biggest game of Pep's reign, especially in recent times. And what I mean by that is, of course, they played Champions League finals. But in many of the games that they've played, these huge games with Liverpool over time, title deciders against Arsenal, Champions League finals, Champions League semi-finals, it's always felt as though, in a sense of what they could be, what they could achieve, what was on the line was in a sense of what could be. So it was always like you felt with Man City when they kept falling short in the Champions League, you thought they will be there again. I mean, they're so consistent, they will be there, and at some point the door will open, and it did against Inter Milan in the final. So a lot of the huge games that they've played, of course, they played bigger games than Anfield this upcoming Sunday, but it was always a sense of, in a sense, what they had to gain. And I feel as though on Sunday, it's not so much what they have to gain because if they win, they'll still be adrift of Liverpool in the Premier League title race. But it could be, in a sense, the opposite, which is, could this represent? It's a case of still trying to prove that you're still relevant, you're still the team. No doubt, if they go to Anfield and pull off a win, that will send some nerves, let's say, across the Liverpool camp. Because even when Man City are down in the dumps, they can come to Liverpool and take out a flying Liverpool team right now. So that will definitely send some nerves and some uncertainty in amongst the Liverpool ranks. But it feels, like I said, in a sense of what they're trying to salvage in terms of their reputation, in terms of their aura, more than anything else, in terms of what Sunday could be for them. So I think this is a huge game if they were to lose and they were to lose in a certain way, Ayub. I think that would be quite damning and quite telling in terms of how they will be perceived moving forward with the rest of the Premier League, especially in Europe. I mean, they do not look like the class of Europe right now, which I've always felt consistently they have been the best team in Europe over the last 4 or 5 years. Yes, Real Madrid have won Champions Leagues, but I've always felt Man City were, to some extent, in my humble opinion, the best team. I don't feel that way now watching them. They don't look as dangerous. They don't look like they've got that mental wherewithal where you think when they come on the pitch, you're already 1-0 down, so to speak. It feels now like everyone's in a game with them. You can score against them. You can create lots of opportunities. You can counter against them. You can run past them. You can overpower them. So these are not great signs. Yes, they've got some squad issues. But just to finish off, I mean, it's a huge, huge game for Pep Guardiola. Another, I mean, you could argue they've got to go there and avoid defeat. I mean, that goes without saying. I won't talk about the Liverpool angle too much. I'll let you focus on that. But from a Man City perspective, they must avoid defeat. And I think if they lose, and if they lose in a certain manner, there'll be a lot of headlines written on Monday morning about perhaps this is the start of the Man City demise in terms of them being the kind of authors of the last decade when it comes to Premier League football. Perhaps their time has come and passed.
I mean, you sort of said that it's probably a must not lose for Man City. I think it's a must win. I really do think it's a must win uh, because it's a huge pivotal moment. Because I think it's, in one sense, Guardiola might be happy that they are playing Liverpool because it could kickstart the season. If they do win against Liverpool, it will kickstart the season because, in a sense, the belief will come back. Because at the moment, you are absolutely right. That invincibility has gone. Uh, and I think it you can tell on the looks of the players as well that they just don't feel as confident as they once were. And it was, if you're not getting the results, it's inevitable. I mean, it's a natural conclusion. If you're not getting good results, it's going to have an impact. And been used to at all. In fact, obviously, it's a new experience for Guardiola and for the players. So it's a difficult situation that they're in. Guardiola obviously is struggling to try and navigate difficult times. Uh, I'm still, as I said, the most bizarre thing was the scratches. That to me, it's just it really. I still, as I said, I've not uh, heard anything more than just what he said. I mean, I don't know whether it was tongue in cheek, but it seemed incredibly bizarre, but concerning as well because. This is it's not what you want to see from a coach. I mean, you can understand annoyance, anger, but to scratch yourself, I mean, he had quite a gash on his nose as well. I mean, he had a fat lip as well. So, I mean, initially I thought he'd been battered by somebody, but I'm sure it'll all come to light. But this game for me, it's a must win. It has to be a must win, and I think that's the mindset City will have to approach it. They've got some good news in the sense Konate is, I think I've just heard he's out for 6 weeks, which
Yeah.
is a massive blow for Liverpool. Van Dijk and Konate are, in my opinion, the best two centre backs. You could probably argue with the Arsenal pairing, but certainly for me, I think they complement each other. They're great defenders, but they're also great leaders as well, especially Konate. I think the way that he's come on, he's a huge presence, and I think when he's not playing, I think Liverpool are missing something quite key at the back. Van Dijk is a much better defender with Konate next to him. So there's a glimmer for Man City because you're always looking for a chink in the armour of the opposition. And this is quite a sizable chink. So I think certainly they should go into that game with a little bit more optimism, even though they've had this awful, awful run. But going on to Liverpool and Slot, they are just, it's a machine at this moment in time. And Slot has been absolutely magnificent. They had a very comfortable victory against Real Madrid. I mean, people can say Real Madrid didn't turn up, but uh, give credit to Liverpool. They were outstanding, absolutely outstanding. Uh, I, I'm, I'm, I'm absolutely sure that there will be nerves with Liverpool because, in a sense, it's almost, uh, it's theirs to lose the way that Man City are playing at this moment in time, everybody is almost saying that Liverpool it's a shoe-in, and that sometimes puts a little bit more added pressure. That the expectation now is that they're playing at home, they're playing against a City side bereft of confidence, so it's almost. It's just turn up and you'll win, which I am sure will add a little bit more pressure than they probably need at this moment in time. But I would say that the way that they play, the confidence is sky high. I don't expect. I expect a challenge. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park, but I expect Liverpool to be victorious. If Liverpool are victorious, they win the league. End of.
End of. Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to disagree with that. I mean, just before I offer my thoughts on Liverpool, I'm very well said, Ayub. I mean, look, Man City, we have to be careful. It's not a case of writing their obituaries, but this is an unprecedented run for them. Again, I mentioned this 3, 4 games ago where I suggested that this run of games could become quite crucial just because of the chronology of the games that they had. Now it's coincided with some injuries, loss of form, loss of then further injuries with Kovacic missing, and then they've had some tough games. They've been obviously spanked by Spurs at home. That's then led to an additional loss of confidence you saw against Feyenoord. Again, I go back to that last goal. It's not the kind of goal you can see, Ayub, when you're 3-2 up in the dying embers of a Champions League game. You know, goalkeeper sprawled out 40 yards away from goal. It's scrambled brains, scrambled minds, if you ask me. Not quite. Again, it's the first time I've seen Man City, Ayub, unsure of themselves. I've seen every other team, when I can tangibly see it on the pitch, go through some semblance of uncertainty in terms of this team's a bit too good for us. Do we go for it? Do we not go for it? Or feeling that mental fragility on the pitch where the other team's just superior, so you just recognize it. I've never felt that done to Man City, even in some of their toughest Champions League losses. I've never felt that they've been on the pitch a little unsure whether they belong on that pitch. They've always had that air of superiority. And that invincibility currently is not there. They rely heavily, obviously, on Rodri's missing for the season. They've got zero power, I would say, and athleticism in the middle of the park, which again in this day and age, you is critical that you have. It's one of the reasons why Calvin Phillips struggled at Man City because you may argue he wasn't at that level. I don't want to go too much on it, but he also he lacked that out and out athleticism in terms of being able to cover serious yardage. In terms of the way Rodri, I guess Rodri's amazing technically, but he's incredibly athletic as well. So look, from a City perspective, there's lots to perhaps lose in this game, especially I would say from a intangibles perspective. But you're right. I mean, there's an opportunity for them as well to say, look, we go in there, we'll still have our fair share of the ball because that's what Man City do. Again, I expect Liverpool perhaps to share it in that respect. But Man City will still feel as though we're good enough to create opportunities. We just need to be consistent. The problem they've got is it's very difficult to see how they stop Liverpool from scoring. Liverpool are free flowing. They've got a very clear way of playing, which is aggressive, progressive football, playing forward, playing longer passes, dynamic runs in behind, threatening in behind. There's not a lot of safe stuff in what Liverpool are doing, which is what I like. Absolutely looking to threaten in behind consistently. Their midfield should be able to cope with Man City's midfield, if you ask me. And then you've obviously got superstars up front who, again, focus a lot on that vertical threat, which is what I think Man City will struggle with. You saw that against Spurs as well. So, from a Liverpool perspective, yeah, you're right. Huge opportunity. I agree with you. There is pressure. There always is when there's expectation. Now, Liverpool are the favourites for the Premier League title. They will be resounding favourites if they win, especially if maybe Arsenal and or Chelsea also drop points. I know Brighton are kind of in the hunt as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go odds on favourite actually, if some of those results also go in their favour. So, which you can't argue against. They're playing the best stuff in the league. They are the best team in the league, in my opinion, quite comfortably right now. They deserve that moniker, and right now they'll fancy themselves in Europe as well after that amazing victory in midweek. But you're right, it's still Man City. Yes, the crowd will be with them, but Man City, I would argue, need to produce a performance of the ages. To be honest with you, to deny this Liverpool team. Yes, an added fillip with Kanate being injured, for at least from a Man City perspective, a big loss for Liverpool. But yes, so let's see how they cope. It'll be interesting to see how he shuffles the pack. And you're right, that sometimes a little bit of that uncertainty at the back, you split that partnership up. It causes Van Dijk perhaps to play a little bit different. Also, the replacement has to come in this type of game against your oldest rival. So it offers a different mental threat, let's say, more than anything. And then you're up against Erling Haaland, who's still obviously one of the best strikers in the world. So huge opportunity for Liverpool. I think if they win, I have to believe that they knock Man City out, even though I think Man City actually have fixtures coming up where I think they will recover in the short term. But I just have to think 11 points plus then not winning in seven continuous games in all competition. I just wonder whether or not they'll have the wherewithal and the fortitude to say, look, we can still overcome this. Look, they'll probably still believe if that is the case. But again, I think perhaps the manner of the defeat might well also be, if it comes to that, might well also be telling. So, huge game. What's your prediction, Ayub? What do you think?
Uh, I think it'll be a lot closer than what people anticipate. I think it will be by the odd goal. I think there'll be goals. I think there'll be goals certainly, especially now that Canate is injured, because that will have an impact. 3-2. I'm going 3-2 Liverpool.
Yeah, I
An
was.
exciting 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was thinking Liverpool 3-1. There's a part of me that respects Man City enough to suggest that there might be a high scoring draw. But I just think Liverpool are too good right now for this version of Man City. So I'm going to go for a 3-1, perhaps a relatively tight game and maybe a late goal just to give them a little bit more space or give the scoreline a bit more comfort than perhaps what appears. But yeah, it should be an enthralling game. Interested to know what the weather's like on Sunday. Maybe that'll play some part because it's not too great up north. But 3-1 for Liverpool, and I think a huge fillip heading into those Christmas fixtures.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute humdinger. And I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm not sure exactly what the weather will be. I mean, it's a little bit, I say milder. It's about 8 degrees here in Blackburn. But there is a nip in the air, hence the scarf. I've had the window open for a little while as well to get some fresh air. If there is such a thing as fresh air in Blackburn, but it is what it is. All right, okay. So That's the game that we're going to be talking about, or we've talked about. OS sort of sent me a little message about choosing a topic of interest. Anything, it could be anything. So we've not discussed this. I've got my own sort of subject that I'm going to be talking about. I hope it's okay. But OS, you go first, because obviously if mine is no good, we can cut it out.
Exactly. No, look, I mean, when I said of interest, it's just something interest is subjective, right? You're soon about to find out how subjective. Um, the topic that I wanted to discuss with you and get your thoughts on a little bit was the recent development of Premier League coaches that are of a certain age, Ayub. It's interesting, right? We've had this development and shift towards perhaps a younger manager. Let me kind of frame it for you in terms of giving you some context. You've got managers like Ipswich Town's McKenna, Russell Martin, who are, I think I've got in my notes, 38. You've got obviously Brighton's coach, who's a young pup at
Yeah.
31. Most of his playing squad, I think, is older than him, or at least some of those key personnel in terms of Danny Welbeck and some others. But you've got Fabian Hörsler, who came from Germany, who's 31. You've got Russell Martin, McKenna, who's 38. Gary O'Neill's 41, Arteta Iraola's 42. I think Ruben Amorim, who's just joined Manchester United, he's 39. The average age, Ayub, in the current season, I believe, is 46. And now, if you go back 30 years to about 1994, 1995, this is based on the reading that I was doing. In that day and age, I'm going to give you some of the managers that were managing in that season, Ayub. So you had Glenn Hoddle, Craig Burley, Gary Megson, you'll remember, Mark McGee, who used to manage Leicester as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Millwall, I think it was, yeah. And you've also got Ray Wilkins, the late great Ray Wilkins. And those five managers in that season, so 1994, 95, so we're talking 30 years ago, they were all in their 30s. But it was a 22 team season then. So the other 17 managers, Ayub, they were all 40 and mid 40s and beyond. And he had five in their 50s. Now I asked myself, okay, that's 30 years ago, and you're now brought onto one. Even just 7 years ago, Ayub, you had basically the average age being about 52. So 6 years is a significant shift. And I think this is the first year, Ayub, in 25 years where we've not had a manager over 60 years of age in the Premier League. And I asked myself, okay, it's interesting, right? Because, okay, why is that the case? Now, the game, I would argue, is getting younger from a playing personnel perspective, right? The game's quicker, the game's faster. It's obviously huge business now. So there's major investment in terms of backroom staff, squads, the type of players that you can recruit, but just in terms of the overall infrastructure of a club, it's huge, right? I'm also pretty confident to say you can probably go maybe at least two levels deep, maybe even three levels deep from a football hierarchy perspective. So I'm talking Premier League, Championship, League One, where you're probably you're a footballer involved in football full time. Maybe League Two onwards, you maybe perhaps having to get a part-time job or something like that. So from a game perspective, in terms of the speed of the game, the intensity of the game, no doubt it's gotten younger. I think you hit your peak earlier. Maybe previously it was all 28, 29. I could argue sometimes now, you look at some of these players, are you probably 23, 24, you're at your absolute athletic best. And those are the players perhaps that teams are relying on consistently. Again, when I think about a Saka at Arsenal or even an Odegaard, they're the absolute fulcrum of what Arsenal are. Even Saliba, who's of a very tender age, Kanata, you mentioned at Liverpool. It's not to say the oldies don't have their moments, but I think the game's definitely getting younger from an athleticism perspective. So I asked myself, what is it with the managers? And I think there's a couple of reasons. I want to get your thoughts on it as well. I think some of it is the fact that you've got a lot of ownership changes now. So in the good old days, when you had a lot of traditional owners in the Premier League, British businessmen, whatever it was, or the hierarchy, talking maybe, I think what was his name at Newcastle, Freddie Shepherd and his father. Not Shepherd's father, but was it Hall? I forget his first name.
Yeah,
But
yeah, John Hall.
John
Yeah,
Hall.
I think it was John Hall. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but you have a lot of traditional owners, let's say Silent Sugar in the good old days with Spurs, where they perhaps, fancied a certain type of manager, maybe someone who's a bit more experienced. Maybe football was played in a very certain specific type of way. But the way football's evolved, whether it's through coaches like Guardiola, who have revolutionized the game in terms of you now look at how teams try and play. I feel now more than ever because the game's leveled up to some extent athleticism wise, there's always that clamor to find an edge in terms of tactics, in terms of high pressing. How can we overload in certain areas to give us maybe a 1 or 2% edge? There's even like talks of like how mid-season breaks and how much work the fitness groups and the backroom staff are doing to unlock certain things. You'll always hear like certain fans talk about, oh, we appointed this great sports science guy who's giving us an extra bit of whatever. It's some of it is a placebo effect to some extent or just a narrative. But I feel as though now with football having changed to such an extent where the game is more intricate, Ayub, the game is more technical, tactical. The good old days of let's play a certain type of way, 4-4-2, we'll play a certain way, get it up the field quicker. I think that's definitely been changed. Rafa Benitez spoke about it when he came on the overlap. So I think some of it is where ownership has changed. They're also looking for perhaps a young manager who they can mold, not mold in terms of teaching them what to do, but in terms of allowing the owners to also get away with certain things. So it's better to get a young coach who's perhaps not as stubborn, let's say, as some of the older managers might be, or set in their ways when it comes to playing styles. So a lot of these younger managers that you'll know this, it's some of their first jobs, first
Yeah.
forays into management. Guardiola's first foray into management, essentially when he came through the ranks from Boss, I think he was coaching one of the youth teams, wasn't he, before he took the big job. So I think a lot of it is where younger managers, you can mold them a little bit more. They're not as perhaps stubborn. They're not perhaps stuck in their ways, so to speak. So I think some of that is that. But like I said, I think the other element is this, whether it's a lazy narrative or whatever. You and I'm interested to hear your thoughts because I know you've got strong views on this. Whether it is a lazy narrative that older coaches perhaps have a very typical way of playing, and they will say, "Yeah, well, football's about winning, and it's about scoring more goals on the opposition." And if that means all this playing around the back nonsense and all this doesn't make sense, especially maybe lower down the ranks. I feel like now more than ever, teams are trying to find certain nuanced ways to be able to compete on the pitch. There's a lot more ownership about taking the ball. Even weaker teams are saying, no, we keep the ball, we play a certain way, we beat the press, and that's how we're going to try and consistently threaten against our opposition. So I wonder whether or not that's some of that shift where all the managers are getting, I want to say phased out. I don't think that's so much the case, but the data's there, isn't it? And I'm just wondering what you think are some of the key reasons. And sometimes you can have years that are outliers. You can have a few firings and a few, but clearly there's a shift towards a sexy young coach who's got, again, you were very enamored with Anthony Iraola when he was linked with Leeds in terms of what he'd done in Spain. So what do you think is what do you think is the number one reason, do you think, of this shift? Because the average is, like I said, is 46. Right now, we've got a number of managers in their 30s in the Premier League, the best league in the world. What do you think is the number one reason for that shift towards younger managers being in the dugout?
I think you've probably covered it in some ways. I mean, in the past, there was a great value on experience. So a coach had to serve his apprenticeship. So he'd do a number of jobs before he was given the opportunity. I think now maybe it is the modern age that its vibrancy, its immediacy. There is uh, young is fashionable, and that's probably the thing. Back in the day, experience was valued. So maybe now the age that we live in, young is much more fashionable. It's much more energetic. It's much more dynamic. You're probably more likely to get results. There's a closeness between. I mean, you talked about the Brighton coach, where there's some players who are actually probably older than him. So maybe there are owners now who don't want this huge gap, huge chasm between the players and the coach because there's a huge age gap. So maybe it's a number of factors. I think on the whole it's the age that we live in. I'm absolutely convinced because there is a dynamism, and dynamism is associated with youth, young, vibrancy. Uh, so maybe the, football just reflects society. Uh, and maybe this is what we're going to see for a little while. I mean, I don't know whether it's cyclical and whether maybe in 20 years' time they might sort of want to see experience again. But certainly in this epoch, I think youth is very much valued, young is very much valued, vibrancy is very much valued. So it 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 seems a natural fit that young coaches are the way to go. Uh, and some of them are bringing success. I mean, the coach at Brighton at the moment is bringing success. I think for the older coaches, it's you move with the times. I think the day of the dinosaur has gone, long gone. Ferguson always adapted. I think Big Sam is always criticised as being quite an archaic but he was very revolutionary. He brought uh, JJ Okocha. He was somebody that he brought into Bolton, and he was one that talked about diets as well. So there is room for the older coaches, but I think society now values youth, young, vibrancy. So in a sense, it's reflected in the world of football.
Yeah, just very quickly, whilst you were talking there, you made some points that triggered some thoughts. You're absolutely right in terms of the immediacy and relevance. Age relevance is important, right? I mentioned it about the players becoming younger in the squad, or at least the critical players are getting becoming the younger members of the squad because again, the game's getting quicker, faster. And I think some of that is because of some of the challenges that brings in terms of the modern player, in terms of the pressures that brings, social media. It's a whole new set of problems and challenges that the player today faces compared to the player of yesterday. It doesn't mean the problems are worse or better. I'm just saying they are different set of problems. Maybe owners think that we need coaches, younger coaches, who can actually relate to some extent, and that's often connected with age, right? If your manager's mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s, and the players are anything between 20 to 33, let's say, or even younger sometimes, 17 to 33, at least they probably assume that that manager is going to have a better chance of connecting in terms of understanding some of the problems and the pressures that young players face than maybe perhaps an older manager. I think the second point I just want to make, and again, you triggered one of my thoughts, was that you have, let's say, perhaps just more information now. So whereas previously you probably think the good old fashioned businessmen who own football clubs would just make a phone call and say, okay, is this man available? And you probably just base it on names. Oh, he's available at Leeds, or he's available at Cardiff, or whatever it might be, where you're thinking, oh, he's available. So you've got a lot of merry-go-round in terms of certain coaching. I'm talking like in the good old days with George Graham and other managers. Whereas now, I think just with the fact, similar to players, Ayub, you've got more information available to recruit better players from all corners of the world. You've got now more information available to you to recruit the best managers in the world. So you can find out, who's the next best thing in France, who's the next best thing in Portugal. Clearly, Ruben Amorim took the fancy of Man United hierarchy, but you wonder whether or not, again, with the advent of the internet and just being able to be better connected with the world in terms of apps and building relationships across the world, you're thinking that's probably allowing you to gain greater access to a talent pool, right? Isn't it? In any walk of life. The last point I just want to make very quickly on that is just reminding me when you were talking about it, maybe it's your black and white scarf, about Bobby Robson at Newcastle. If you remember how it ended for him at
Mm,
the end, there was a lot of talk. He was one of the older managers, obviously, in the Premier League at the time. And he was a great story, wasn't he, in terms of going back home. But you remember, in a sense, how it ended. Some of the young players got a bad rap, didn't they? Kieran Dyer being one of them, in terms of how
mm,
perhaps they treated the late great Bobby Robson in the good old days. Like you could never imagine it. I don't know what you think, but you could never imagine that dynamic happening in this today's Premier League, where you have a manager that old
mm.
and managing this type of squad. I'm not saying it can't happen, but you just wonder whether or not that dynamic. Again, I'm thinking about the Joe Kinnears and a few other managers that spring to mind. So I think there is some of that. It's about understanding the today's player, and there is this perhaps lazy narrative, but I think to be fair, it's an informed narrative that the modern manager who's taking refresher courses and has just taken his courses where they cover all aspects of the modern player coaching, all the rest of it, perhaps they're better equipped than this what you mentioned about where let's just get the guy with the most experience and who's won the most stuff and just get him in and he'll automatically transfer us to contenders. So it's an interesting dynamic. I'm interested to see if we ever get a coach in the Premier League who's in his 20s. That would be something. But you wouldn't put it past it given where the trend is headed.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, a really interesting subject that, and it's something that I think. I mean, I suppose. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. A coach uh, in their twenties, probably unlikely. But then, in saying that, we would have never expected somebody 31 managing a side in the Premier League. But it's really interesting, and I think it's very much of the time at this moment in time. I
Correct.
think it reflects the world that we and in a sense, if it's successful, it then continues because other clubs will want to follow a successful business model, which is if it's a young coach which has proven successful, then that's what they'll want as well. So in a sense, it will probably continue. to increase. So, really interesting subject.
Good.
Actually, in a sense, it almost seems as if we've discussed this, or at least on the subject, because mine's about age as well, but it's more about the man. I was just trying to sort of wrap my brains and sort of think about something to talk about. I want it to be sport related because obviously I want it to be because it's a football podcast. I want it to be sport, and I just thought of Cristiano Ronaldo. It's I, I looked at his numbers again, and everybody knows his numbers, but I just thought that he is probably the epitome of absolutely getting the most out of one's own ability or maximizing one's ability. In a sense, I just thought that this is probably one of the most remarkable human beings uh, that I am aware of. I mean, I'm sure, obviously, historically, there's lots of important human beings, but if you look at the life of Cristiano Ronaldo, and this is not about Messi or Ronaldo, this is purely about Cristiano Ronaldo. I just look, this is a guy that I think in years to come should be an exemplar of if you want to maximize your life in terms of, certainly in terms of career, there is a template that's been set ever since he started playing football. I mean, he started at Sporting, uh, but when he first came, I think Gary Neville speaks very, very fondly and affectionate about his work ethic. It was a little bit hit and miss at the start in terms of his playing ability, but in terms of his attitude, Gary Neville says that he was one of the hardest workers, if not the hardest worker. And I just absolutely besotted with his mindset to be 39 years of age, closing in on 40, he's still playing international football. I cannot believe the man has played over 200 international games. He scored 135 international goals. I think since 2009, virtually every single year, his average is a goal a game. There's been a couple of periods where it's not been the case. I think at Juve and that sort of hit and miss spell that he had at Manchester United. But apart from that, it's been impeccable. He very rarely is injured. The hunger. He still celebrates goals as if it's the first goal that he scored. I just think that I don't know. I mean, I think there is no doubt that he is somebody that is not underappreciated, but I don't think he's appreciated enough, not just for his football, but just as an example of how to do the right thing. I mean, historically, there's characters like Gaza, Georgie Best, who shone brightly, but for very, very brief moments. This guy has sustained a level of quality. Now you can question playing in the Saudi League whether that's quality, but he's still playing international football. He's still scoring international goals. He's still committed. He's still hungry. There's still no sign this guy giving in. Now you can say he's very selfish because he's got these personal records, but to me, it's almost immaterial that this is a guy that we should be lauding. We should be saying, right, business in the world of business, people should be using Ronaldo as an example. In any walk of life, parents should be talking about Ronaldo, saying, right, this is what you need to do. This is the level of commitment. So I just wanted to talk about Ronaldo and just say he's one of the most remarkable human beings I think that the world has ever seen.
That's it's a wonderful piece actually. I was making some notes whilst we were talking because there were so many different thoughts that I was thinking about. First and foremost about how you mentioned about how parents should be using him as an example. I'm just thinking my son's currently undergoing his GCSE exams. Maybe I should be telling him this is the kind of this is the kind of effort that you need to be putting in to achieve the results that you want to.
But you know what I mean, though, because it's just he absolutely his diet. I mean, there's so many stories. I mean, there was one story. I think Patrice Evra was saying that he went to his house. It was, I think, on
Yeah.
an off day, or and he had dry chicken, salad. Rather than enjoying himself, he's saying to Patrice Evra, "Let's have a little knockabout." It just is absolutely obsessive about being the best, taking no chances at all to compromise his ability and his talent.
Yeah, you're right. The great thing about that story is how Patrice tells the story because he mentions about how Cristiano invites him for lunch, and he's thinking, "All right, yeah, okay, lunch. This will be a
Yeah.
this will be a nice do." And you mentioned right, chicken without any real seasoning or without any real sauce. It's water, a salad, and then he says, "Right, let's hit the pool for a little while, and then not just pool. I'm talking like actual swimming, not just relaxing in the pool. And then there's some keepy uppies." And he says, "Man, why did you invite me if we were just gonna do some more training?" So the way he tells the story is fascinating,
Yeah,
but I hear you loud and clear. You're not talking simply just about rankings from a footballing perspective. You're talking about ultimately how, in a sense, the mindset. And I'll give the viewers a little bit of an insight. I mean, we got to know each other, Yub, in the early parts of 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
One of the things you told me at that time, and it's never left me. Obviously, I had the fortune slash misfortune of sitting next to you at work. But
And you've not recovered since.
I've not recovered since, unfortunately. But I remember you saying when we discussed that. Okay, if you had a choice, what would you love to do in terms of just if as you always say, money's no object. And I remember you saying that one of the big passions that you had was understanding the psyche of sports people and what makes them tick. Like what is it in their kind of mental capacity and the mentality we spoke about, I think, Johnny Wilkinson and Dan Carter and Tiger Woods and others in different sports about when you're the 1% of the 1% of arguably the 1%, what is it that makes you different and driven? And I agree, it's fascinating when you watch some of these players. There are of these sports people. One of the most commonalities is you mentioned the word the obsessive nature of perfecting their craft and not. You think about Johnny Wilkinson in terms of drop goals, or Dan Carter similarly in terms of his kicking and became the best fly half in rugby union history. Again, Tiger Woods, arguably the greatest golfer, and I think that's the angle you've come from, which is a fair comment. It's not about Messi, it's not about Ronaldo. I think with Ronaldo, I'd be interested. I've watched a lot of documentaries on him. He left home quite an early age in terms of going to a sporting academy. So I think from a very early age, he gave a lot of sacrifice in terms of not being mollycoddled. Obviously, he lost his father at a very young age, I believe, due to alcoholism. He's been very obviously close to his mum ever since. So I think there is some semblance of adversity, some struggle. I'd be interested to know, again, if you perhaps read the stories of all famous sports people, whether there's any kind of personal commonalities there in terms of any upbringing and what have you. But yeah, in terms of his efforts, his endeavor, early doors at Man United after he came from Sporting Lisbon, you're right. He was a bit of a flair player, a lot of trickery, no real end output. Perhaps he was fortunate to be in that Manchester United team, surrounded by that type of mindset and that manager who took him under his wing. But for all the credit that some of those players can take, Roy Keane can take, Sir Alex Ferguson, others, it ultimately comes down to one man and one man himself. And you're right, in terms of the progression he took himself, that required self-discipline, that required self-teaching, that required a certain religious nature of in terms of just being absolutely committed to your craft. And I think those are the lessons that you speak about in any endeavor, Ayub, not least just in sports, but how you have to be kind of obsessive about uh, understanding that these are the sacrifices that I have to make, and there's certain pounds of flesh that you have to give along the way in terms of personal relationships, whatever it may be, for the time you have to put in this pursuit, this relentless pursuit of excellence, of being the absolute best of what you can be. And you're absolutely right in terms of his age and the output that he's currently got, still giving in what is one of the most athletic sports in the world. Is something to be applauded. So I salute you. I think it's a really good topic. I think it's one that needs delving deep. And again, I'd be more interested also to just see how some of the other sports in terms of the some of the icons. You've got LeBron James in basketball, right? In terms of being advanced to 40 and still putting some of the numbers that you think basketball, it's an up and down sport, and yet he's still able to put forward. But yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo, incredible athlete, incredible sports person, and from a psyche perspective and a mentality, I do agree with you. There can't be many more stronger in terms of that level of consistency and that obsession over excellence over such a period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's it. That sort of covers the show. Really interesting little bit at the end. I thought was that was your piece was was excellent. I thought it was something really interesting. I mean, it's like now suddenly it becomes obvious that right, there are lots of young managers, but it begs the question: what is the mindset,
Well,
or what is the culture which is creating that?
yeah, I was going to just say though, I did mention that the average age in the Premier League this season is 46, and lo and behold, how old is Daniel Farke? You 46.
He's he's
He'll,
what is he?
he'll fit in seamlessly.
Yeah, uh, but but he's I'm not saying too much about him at the moment. We're doing all right, so I don't. I'll sort of I'll give him the benefit of the doubt over the last few weeks. He's made some decent choices in terms of selection. He's even made substitutions before the 70th minute. So at the moment, I'll just cut him a little bit of slack. Hopefully, I'll be cutting slack tomorrow as well when we get a good result. All right, okay, right. On that note, right, it's let you enjoy Friday evening, OS. It's probably about eight
Likewise.
o'clock, 9 o'clock in Dubai and you're starting your long weekend. So enjoy time with your family.
Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend, and we'll probably catch up early next week. All right. And to all the viewers, have a nice weekend, and we'll see you soon. Ta-da.